Hello and welcome to episode 1 of The Rest is Content, a podcast all about social media, content and community building online. I'm your host, Simon Kane, and for the last 16 years I've been an award-winning social media freelancer, comedian and podcaster. I'm basically a triple empty threat. In that time I've worked on over 100 household brands, I've written a couple of published books, I've spoken on stages all over the country, so I thought it was about time I launched a podcast to talk about what makes a community grow, what makes good content versus content that just marketing executives like, and everything in between. And in the first episode, I've got Dylan Patel on, who is the head of social media management at Born Social. We chatted about the importance of community engagement, and in particular, the comment section on TikTok, the challenges of measuring success and giving an ROI for some brands in social, as well as the need for authenticity and transparency within your community. I'll be honest with you, I have some betting music. I was working on an animation because I wanted this podcast to be perfect from day one. But as you know, because you also probably create content or else you wouldn't be watching this, at some point that becomes procrastination. And I know it's better just to get started and add these things in later. But also, I have a theory in the world of podcasting and in the world of TikTok that people are more interested in the value of the content than the production value of the content. So let's just get into this. Let's start with how Dylan got his first role in social media at a time when there were jobs, but no industry.
How did I get my first job in social? It's interesting. I would say, like a lot of people who are my age or of my generation, kind of fell into it. 2010, 2011, I guess, was a time when social was perhaps emerging as a bit of a career. It perhaps wasn't taken as seriously as it is now by brands, and maybe wasn't given the prominence it has now. So I used to work as a graphic designer, and I had an uncle who was running a business, and I just got the sense that what he was doing on Facebook, because of course at the time Facebook was that sort of premier channel that everyone was scrambling to be present on. I got a sense that what he was doing could be better. So I kind of just went up to him and said, look, I've got some ideas. Can I help you out here? It was very sort of unpaid and just, I guess, allowed me to stretch my skills a bit further. And it seemed to work. And I guess off the back of that, just slowly built up a bit of a freelance portfolio of clients. Very much started off in the sort of food and drink FMCG space. And then around 2015, moved agency side. And since then, I've kind of just worked my way through various agencies to end up where I am now at Born Social.
Do you know what's amazing to me? Right, so as I said, this is like number 5 or 6 that I've recorded. And every person who is, I'm not going to ask how old you are, but of the same age as us, who has been in it around the same amount of time, has almost the exact same story of how they got into social. And I have someone coming on who is a bit more junior, who's been in it less time. And I'm fascinated to hear how they got into it. So like for me, I was doing a degree in computer science with games tech. I didn't want to do games, so I focused on web development. Placement year, I made a social network. This is 2008. So like that was the plan. And then I took it down the final year, and local businesses that I'd like kind of got on my network that now didn't exist were like, can you run our MySpace pages? And I was like, yes, I can. And then I bought up a portfolio. And then when I moved back to London, I was like, is this still a thing? Can I do this a thing? And then I got a job in it. And it's like mad to think like, if you contextualize like, like the 2008, 2009, 2010s, there was no industry, but there were jobs.
No, 100%. I mean, and also I went to university to study civil engineering of all things. So to think I went to university to study civil engineering, I dropped out after a year because I very quickly realized it wasn't for me. But think where I could have ended up and where I ended up. It's a bit nuts to think about.
I don't know many people, because there's degrees in social media now, which I always find fascinating, because I'm like, what are you being, and this sounds really horrible because I'm sure they do something and I'm not aware of it, but I always think, what are you learning in that you could learn better doing it?
I completely agree. I think in this career, I mean, look, it's very easy for me to say this, having got to where I've managed to luckily get to my career, but I can't imagine having got to where I have managed to get to without having just learning on the job and doing the doing versus I guess hearing the theory about it in a course. But I guess that's, everyone's different, everyone learns in different ways, and so if nothing else, it's nice to have that recognition that it's the kind of career that people can choose and go and learn about, and it's been given that sort of stamp of approval.
No, I know exactly what you mean. There's part of me that kind of, if so I live in Scotland now, and like your first degree is like on the house, as it were, up here. If you were born here, so I'm like, I'm not going to get it. But I've always thought like, if I could do it for free, I kind of want to go back and do that degree, just to be like, what's missing? What am I? not aware of.
I don't know. I mean, to me, the thought of going back into education fills me with dread. But I was also that child who just never really excelled at school, and sort of it just never really was for me. I was very much the kind of person who preferred learning by doing, and I think sitting in a classroom and reading textbooks just never really spoke to me. But
I had a debate with someone the other day because they were saying to me, I think they said they've read 20 books so far this year, and I said I think I'm on like 11, and they went, oh, which
Yeah.
ones? And I got out like my Audible thing, and they were like, that's not really reading, and I go, no, it is. Like I'm still taking in the information. Like just because you're narrating it in your head, and I've got someone else doing it for me, I can't like diss someone for learning a different way, you know?
Absolutely, and also, I mean, I probably don't read as much as I should, but I'm very much a big fan of non-fiction versus fiction. I struggle to get into fiction as much as I do non-fiction, and I've got people who, again, similarly say to me, if it's not fiction, it's not really reading. I'm still learning. I'm still, stretching broadening my horizons and my imagination and learning more. So yeah, everyone's different, I guess.
I had a look at your LinkedIn just to kind of, because I know job titles are incredibly fluid, especially in some parts of this industry. And your job title at the moment is Head of Social Media Management, but you've previously been Director of Social Media Management.
Yeah.
What would you say is the difference between those two jobs?
It's a good question. I think if I look back at my career, I've historically worked my way up through PR agencies that had a social function. So I was working within or leading social media teams within a wider PR agency, and I think that often meant being a generalist, so doing a bit of everything, doing the creative, the strategy, the social media management, the creative. The difference at Born is an agency that's got enough scale that we have individual departments. We've got a creative department, a strategy department, an ops, a FinOps department. We've got production and design, and so we've got a social media management department, and our role and our purpose is very specific. So, we're very much there about embedding ourselves within the audiences of the brands that we're working with, understanding what makes them tick, surfacing those insights to create the content, alongside obviously the channel management. But it means that I've got a very specific role and can focus in on that. Whereas I think in previous roles, I was doing a bit of everything. So that probably explains the difference there.
So I noticed that we both worked at Splendid, for example, Splendid Comms.
Yeah.
And I think historically more of a PR agency than a social agency.
100%.
And I found, and they were amazing, by the way. Like there's no negativity there, but I have found there is a difference in culture around social in an agency that's pure social versus ones that have PR and now they do social, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I think, I understand why, but I think often at PR agencies with a social function, the people in the social team are often alongside doing their job, fighting day in, day out to sell in the value of what they're doing, both to clients, but also to their peers. In most PR agencies I've worked in, a brief comes in, a budget comes in, the client says it's channel agnostic, but more often than not, you'll end up with a PR heavy response versus a social first response. And I think there can often be a bit of a tension there, and dare I say, a bit of frustration from the social team. So I think, working like where I am at somewhere like Bourne, where everyone speaks the same language, is a real breath of fresh air, and it means we're all kind of in it together. All coalesce around that same brief, and not necessarily fighting for, where should budget be allocated, and instead we're going like, well, what's best for the brief and what's going to deliver what the client needs, which is quite nice.
I remember when I was working, it wasn't at Splendid, it was at, I'm trying to remember which agency now, but it was around 2015, 14, and they wanted to buy tube, like adverts on the underground, and then they wanted social to support that. And they were talking about how the social reach wasn't as much as the tube ads. And I said, I cannot, that doesn't compute with me, because what you've shown me is the TfL have sent you this thing that says this will be seen by like 50, 100,000 people over the course of a month. And I'm like, it won't though, because if you go and stand at that tube station, they're just passing. Not everyone will look at that advert. Whereas if I tell you that like this many people have retweeted or posted or what, like I can categorically say they've seen it and done something with it. So although the numbers are less, I can prove it better than you can.
That salience piece as well, right? What's somebody going to take in from a tube ad, and what will they take in from the equivalent social media post? And I mean, look, I guess proof is in the pudding in a certain respect. The latest data suggests social is now the most consumed form of media, and I think that's probably just reflective of where things are heading. So yeah,
I was thinking about this last night because I was watching. You watched The Traitors?
Yes,
I assume so. Everyone's knee deep in this right now.
100%.
When Nico left, because I thought Nico was an interesting booking, because it's obviously a slight play to get that YouTube audience on there, but he's also brilliant. So, like, there are other YouTubers you could have booked who would be a more cynical booking to get
Yeah,
that YouTube audience. And I would love to know. Well, I actually, this morning, the views are up. So, like, I assume it's because as the series
interesting.
goes on, they will be up. But I was
Yeah,
expecting a slight drop off when he left because his audience are going to,
overtaking
go
over
back
its
to his
people.
videos and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
it's a really, really interesting insight, and I guess it's not just the traitors, right? You look at Strictly, where you've got George Clark, and
Mm,
increasingly over the last few years, the bookings have been. I guess they used to start off as YouTubers back in the day with was it
mm.
Joe Sugg.
Yeah.
More recently, it's been TikTokers, but like you say, people like Nico who've still absolutely got that pull on YouTube are getting bookings. And it's interesting. I was listening to what was it, The Rest is Entertainment, where they were talking about this
Mm,
big play by channels to bring in um, I guess social media first content creators into linear TV. You had the Beast games on Amazon, for example, and the money they're investing
mm.
in those sorts of formats. And I think from what I'm hearing, Amazon paid through the nose for Mr. Beast. The question is whether those people are really going to follow them through onto channels
Mhm.
like Amazon Prime, or to follow people through to BBC and Strictly, or the Traitors. Yeah, I'm not convinced that's necessarily happening. That being said, I mean, I guess everyone's slightly different, and I suppose something like Amazon Prime is quite different to a mainstay like Strictly Come Dancing.
Mm.
So yeah, I guess interested to see where that goes in the future.
I would love to see Mr. Beast do a video with like zero budget because I've got
Yeah,
to a stage where I'm a huge fan. Like, I love what he's done. I think he's dedicated his life to so much and built a really interesting business and media empire. But my brain goes at because sometimes I watch his videos and I go, "You're just throwing money at this now." Like,
yeah,
and it makes sense because it will keep people there. But I would love to see you do it with no budget.
100%.
Creative restraints are more interesting when you have no budget and you have no time and you have to create something interesting.
Yeah, there's no tension there, right? I guess
Mm,
he's got money and he's throwing something at it, gets to do what he wants. I think the interesting thing would be, as you say, let's put him in a situation that is perhaps a bit alien to him,
mm,
but also, and I think interestingly, I don't know whether you watched the Beast games. I'll be
mhm,
honest, I'm not a huge follower of Mr. Beast. I've seen his content. How he shows up on his YouTube channel versus how he showed up on that TV show was completely different because he's just not
mm.
a television presenter, right? I guess
Yeah.
not criticizing him, but he just doesn't have the charisma to be a television presenter,
Mm.
and it's a very different format, and so he comes across so differently. So for me, the incredible thing he's built up on his YouTube channel didn't quite translate over to Amazon Prime. Whereas I think the reason why Nico, George Clark are working better on shows like Strictly and The Traitors is because they're stepping into an already established format where they can just be themselves versus having to translate what they've got online into a whole new audience.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm quite lucky in that I did stand up for like 12 years and that
Nice.
kind of helped with like because when brands say they want to be more engaging, 99% of the time that's we want to be funnier.
Yeah,
And so those two worlds kind of overlapped for me for a long
yeah,
period of time and now I just be funny online.
love that.
Depending on who you ask. But the point is that like that means that I've seen loads of friends of mine build up these huge like YouTube, TikTok recently, channels and brands try to do the same thing. And my theory is that like people want to be brands and brands want to be people. And
Yeah,
the overlapping of those worlds is going to be really interesting as we go forward because I think people buy from people. They're
100%.
becoming cynical of brands, and I don't know if you've seen that when you're working with different brands. If you're finding it slightly harder with ones that don't maybe have a mascot or a face or a influencer or a CEO that wants to be the focal point.
It's a good question. I think the brands we're seeing the most success with are the ones who understand the need to use social media as a social platform. I
Mm,
think often the things we
mm,
uh, say to clients is, social media wasn't designed for brands; it was designed for people to connect with people.
mm,
We're very much guests in this space as brands. And sure, social channels have evolved and adapted to make space for brands, but at its core, at its heart, it's about human-to-human connection. And I think the more you can lean into that, and the more you can act like a person, bring in some humanity to what you're doing, whether that's through your content, having a mascot, having your CEO feature, or even just treating your social channel as a kind of place to talk to people. And go to where people are rather than expect to come to you, the more success you're going to have. And so we see that not just through content, but I think there's this big rise in the importance of community as content, and that's something where we're
mm,
having a huge amount of success, where we are showing up in other people's content in their comment section, not as a brand, but as, like, dare I say it, one of the cool kids, one of the people who are taking part in the conversation. And that's what's
mm,
driving that engagement, because people are seeing those comments and be like, yeah, that's a bit of me. You guys get me. You guys are talking to me on the same level as I am. And I think that's what's really landing with people.
This is one of the things I originally messaged you about when you put up this post about the comment section. A lot of it's quite funny, like, I don't know if you found this because you've been in the social media industry for so long. Like, it started out with, like, say, Facebook, and then latterly sort of Twitter, when it was Twitter, sort of mainly text-based. Then it went to kind of image-based. Then it went to kind of video. And now it's kind of going, I think, full circle to a little bit more text-based, like that kind of split in video and text. So the last 2 years, I've been working a lot with brands, basically being the funny person in their comments. And it's mad because the metric there is basically getting likes on a comment, but you're essentially hoping. So say a video gets 1 million views. Let's say 10% of those people are going to view the comments because loads of people are just going to be like casual. So then your metric has to be like, okay, what of the number of people that viewed the comments that you don't know, read your comment, liked your comment, and then you have to tell a client, okay, by the way, it got 1 million views, we got 1,000 likes, but that's good. Like, how are you approaching that?
It's a really good question. And do you mean specifically for sort of like proactive community management where you're showing up in other people's content?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. And actually, I think there's a real missed opportunity there. Or I say missed opportunity, I dare say social channels are playing catch up, and we'll have a solution soon. But it frustrates me to no end that there's no way for me to measure the impact of me showing up on somebody else's feed. We've had so much success with some of our brands, Guinness, Ford, Stanley, where our comments have got thousands upon thousands of like. The other week, somebody, one of our fantastic social media managers, commented on somebody else's TikTok from the Ford account. It got something like 20,000 likes. And I was like, how do we quantify that to the client beyond saying it got 20,000 likes? What were the impressions here? How many of those people came through to the Ford channel and liked it? What was the output there? And there's currently no way to track that, which is so frustrating for us as marketers. But the sooner somebody can come out with a way to track that and allow us to report back on that to clients, the better, because it's such a missed opportunity. At the moment we're building out scopes for clients where we're, understandably clients are saying, great, how many pieces of content am I going to get from this? And we're happy to go back to them saying, look, we can give you X number of pieces of content, but you really need to create time for us to also just be showing up on people's feeds, because this is where people are showing up more effectively. This is where your brands are going to get so many eyeballs. And I think there's a real shift among some of our clients who are really seeing that as the next sort of frontier of social proactive community management. And that takes skill, right? It's very easy to say to a social media manager, do some community management, but the rules of community management have changed. You need to be fantastic copywriter to start with. You also need to be able to talk in certain respects for certain brands in brain rot. I'm really proud of the fact that our social media manager team speak exclusively in brain rot at Born. And, I'm not ashamed to admit that I'm of a generation that doesn't fully understand everything they say, but fantastically, we've got some translators in the team. But I know that, if we have a brand coming to us saying, I need to be showing up in TikTok comments, I know exactly who to brief that into, because they just live and breathe it. And yeah, I think the sooner brands realize the benefit of this, the better. But I've been in a few quarterly business reviews over the last few months alone where we've showed them the power of showing up in content, showing up in comments. And I think we're slowly chipping away at that and getting to a place where brands are going to be investing just as much money in a team who can show up for their brand in other people's content as much as they want to be showing up in their own feed.
The only thing, so I used to really love Twitter. It is now my most hate. I can't stand it.
Yeah.
But the one thing, and I will only give him this level of credit, the one thing I think Elon has done since he got in, now I don't know if he was going to do it, whether they were going to bring it in anyway, but that you can see the number of views each post has got. Yeah. Like, that to me was a stroke of genius, because it means that, let's say you have that, let's say million, reach tweet. I'm going to call them tweets. And then the underneath comment is like something that you're replying to, and that one had 50,000. You can say, well, it's not 1 million people. We're dealing with 50,000 people. We're dealing with, so a percentage of that rather than a percentage of that. But the reason we did it is that it's kind of odd that a platform that kind of, as in TikTok, that has so much culture, so much relevancy, so much community around it, hasn't invested in analytics around community for brands. Now, I know, like you said, it's not made for that. But you want us there? Like, we're the ones buying the ads. We're the ones buying the spaces. There aren't many creators I know who pay for ads when they're putting out their content, even though, it might help them.
No, I agree. But I would be very surprised if both TikTok and Instagram, because actually we're seeing a huge amount of success on Instagram with a similar approach, aren't investing in some sort of tools to provide that to brands, and that will be revealed at some point down the line. If they aren't, and if they happen to be listening, then word to the wise, get on it, because I think it's a missed opportunity there. But yeah, as you say, look, TikTok is, the I guess the on the cold face of culture. Instagram is still very much a place where people go to find out what's going on in culture, and yeah, for brands to not be able to track the impact of that work they're doing, and the time they're investing, right, in having either their teams or agencies spend time to engage with the communities on those channels, feels like such a missed opportunity.
Like, I come from a world that's kind of stand up as well as marketing, and TikTok sponsored the Fringe 2 years ago. And I remember saying to so many friends of mine, as well as I was just shouting about it on my Facebook and stuff, saying to friends who were doing content, I was like, get on TikTok. That is a statement of intent. I see in my day job, it is becoming more of a search engine. They are kind of the only place you can discover shows. Like, you're not really going to look for that on YouTube. It's too long form. It's not really quite there. Yeah, short's okay, but it's not there. You're not really going to discover a relationship on X anymore. Same with Facebook. Instagram's okay. I like their Reels function. We'll talk about that in a sec. I think, sorry, not Reels, trial Reels. I think that was a stroke of genius. I sold out a 100-seater over the course of a 25-day run on TikTok. That was it. So, like, I know firsthand that it does well. We had like 1.6 million views across like the channels over like the 11 months before the Fringe, and we were full every day. So like it's definitely a place that people are discovering stuff, and people are looking for interesting things to go and see, and also things to go and do. And I think being in the comments kind of embeds you in real world as well as sort of the fake world, because you're looking for the right thing. Do you have a strategy for finding like interesting content to comment on, to get involved with your brands?
Very good question. So we've got a really good system at Born Social so we've got a newsroom function, which is our sort of real-time trend-led team or product, I should say. And they're designed to sort of work with those clients who are really keen to get right in the middle of culture. And we've got a really interesting system where we've got culture scouts. Those are people who effectively are briefed on a particular brand, and they generate reports about, what's going on in the sector, what are people talking about, what are the topics that the audience that we're trying to reach for this brand are talking about and are interested in. We take those reports, we then have brainstorms, come up with ideas, send them over to clients, get those all turned around within, often within a few days, if not a couple of weeks. But I think so much of this just relies on people who are so connected to culture individually. So, we're very keen on ensuring that we don't want people to be chronically online at Born. That way lies burnout and dissatisfaction with your job. But I think inherently, as people who work in social media, we are just glued to our phones 24/7. I certainly am. I can tell you that the last thing I do before going to bed is a good 20-minute scroll on TikTok. Then I switch over to my New York Times games, play that for 15 minutes, and then I'm off to bed. And then more often than not, first thing in the morning, I'm scrolling on TikTok. So we invariably, even though our instruction to people is please do not be chronically online, we invariably get people coming to work first thing in the morning, not searching for trends, but they're coming full of ideas about what's already going on, because they're just scrolling in their personal time. I would love to say that there's a silver bullet to ensuring that we are finding the right conversations and in there first, but actually I think it's just about finding people who are passionate about social and who are doing it in their own spare time, and who can bring their own, I guess also bring their own For You page experience to what we're talking about, right? Because the person who works on Ford's will be very different to the person who works on Guinness, who will be very different to the person who works on Barclays. And also they'll have their own personal For You pages, but the mix of all those together gives us a really good view of like what actually is going on in culture, what's the stuff that's going to resonate. And I guess also just as an agency, we've got a really good culture of sharing ideas, sharing things cross team, sharing things cross department, and picking up those ideas that we think are going to work. And then hopefully, you've got ideas that will work for a quick turnaround, but now and then you'll have that sort of seed of an idea that can scale into something much bigger. We recently did something with Guinness called the Ginbrella, a post that went out on Instagram, and it was just like an instructional post, almost in the style of like an IKEA do-it-yourself, build your own furniture thing, which had a Guinness umbrella that you put on your pint, so that it meant on a rainy day you could enjoy your pint of Guinness. Got such a fantastic response for the back of that we 3D printed a real one, put it on a pint, filmed it, and now it's gone so big that we're looking to turn it into a real product that we can gift to people. So, those are the kind of things that I think for me are like why I do what I do. It's like finding those little seeds of ideas, and then not only seeing when people are responding well to it, but then seeing how you can scale that. And we've got this really great mantra that we call social first, not social only. We are a social agency, but the ideas we come up with can absolutely scale beyond social. And I think that's the challenge we often set to like all the people that work with us.
For me, like if I know someone is working on a brand and I see something interesting, even if I think, well, it's big, they've probably seen it, I just pass it on. I think of Stephen Maycock also works at Bourne. Yeah. So like I found it's maybe 5 months ago now. There was something that just was going off on I'll keep it anonymous brand stuff. But like I saw something on one of the brands who was an ice cream brand. You know which one then. And like I was just like, hey, have you seen this? And he was like, no, I'm going to pass this on to the team. Thank you so much. Like because like I just feel like you can't be everywhere. You have to have that community. And like I feel like as social people, we have to be a community as well. So like if there's something that's interesting and you're friendly with people, why would you not pass that on? And so like when I work in different agencies, I see the difference in like some places that they will just go, hey, this one's for X team, or you know, hey, I've just seen this. And then you see it in other places where you don't get that kind of, and maybe it's because they're not seeing stuff. It might just be that. But I like that you can't really tell because it's other people's algorithm. And I always find it quite tricky to know sometimes what's trending until you've asked the rest of the team and gone, has anyone else seen this trend, or is it just on my feed? Because
you don't know whether what you're seeing has reached that critical mass where it's suddenly on everyone's feed, or you're like it's showing up because you've got that niche interest. And you know, I won't lie. There'll be times when I will share things to the team. They'll be like, Dylan, this is very rogue. Don't know what you're saying. Like, well, look, it's got 1 million likes on TikTok, so there's something in it. It's just clearly not reached you yet, or you're not the right audience for it.
But your kids are going to love it.
Exactly. You know, I think if we were all to work in our individual bubble and base our work off the things that we see in our own feeds, then we wouldn't get anywhere. And it goes back to that principle of marketing, right? Which is, remember, you are never your audience, or you're rarely your audience. And I think the things that underpin the marketing and advertising industry often remain the same and continue to remain the same throughout generations. It's just the way in which you respond to them. So I think, the thing I would always often caution both clients and my team on is, don't assume that because you're seeing it, it's necessarily representative of what's going to land. Always be curious and look outside your own bubble, because otherwise you risk sort of really focusing in on a niche that's not necessarily going to be right for your brand and audience.
I was doing stuff for Lidl in their, in the comment sections for different things. And this was just over a year ago now was the last time I was on that. And when we first did it, so maybe it was 6 months before that, I started finding stuff on Lidl's account because I'm logged in on it, and then I realized, hang on, the problem is that this is quite skewed because I'm in this brand account. It's going to be sent stuff and whatever. The best way I found was to like try it on my own personal account, but then I thought, well, hang on, my personal account's incredibly like tech heavy, incredibly like gadget friendly, like it's nothing to do with this. So again, this is probably like my degree. My only use of my degree was like, where does the algorithm? Okay, you make a dummy account, and like you basically like flood it with like bakery stuff or middle aisle stuff or whatever, and eventually just kind of curate the algorithm that like you want your audience to be looking at, to kind of be in the same viewing profile that your audience hopefully in, that's kind of separate to your personal stuff, because you don't want to screw up your own algorithm, do you? It's like giving your Amazon account to someone and getting them to buy something random. Like, you don't want that. And then you also don't want to do it on the brand account, because the brand account is naturally going to be that. So that's my way of kind of finding stuff.
No, I think it's a really good shout, and I know a lot of people in our team have an own sort of like personal work feed that they use to curate what they are seeing, which is interesting actually, because I guess there's a link there with the rise of Finsters, and I don't know whether you saw Netflix's Finster Netflix 2, which has taken the world by storm. It's got something like 800,000 followers, and it's a private account on Instagram called Netflix 2, and it's run by the admin, and it's basically the Netflix admin stream of consciousness, and they run it as if it's a private account, but it's not.
Oh wow.
It's fantastic. It's such a great idea.
I will absolutely go and follow that. That's amazing.
Yeah,
okay. I was going to ask you, because so you put this post out basically talking about the comments section and how it's, like you said, the new frontier. And I'm wondering if, like, has your definition of like what good community management changed then in 2025?
Absolutely. To be fair, this happened before 2025, but I think brands are finally starting to decouple community management and community engagement and customer service and all the things that go through with that. I think, as with all things with social media, as it evolves, you find specialisms that often need a dedicated team or a specific skill set. 10 years ago, community management was replying to a Facebook comment with thanks. These days, there's so much more to it, and whether that's proactive community management. And so good community management, I think, is very much about identifying how you want to show up as a brand, and then ensuring that you are not talking down to people, you're talking with people. 10 years ago, community management was very much about just going back to people and saying thank you for this lovely comment. or liking their comment. And these days it's split into so many different elements. And so you've got your customer service piece, which I think, you don't necessarily need a specific social media manager for. It could be something that your customer services team could be doing internally. But I think where the value in a social media manager is bringing that levity, that personality. And I think community management without personality is now not particularly effective. So it's about ensuring that your teams have got a clear brief. They know the tone that you want to inhabit as a brand. And you're showing up in that way. Conversational, speak like a human being. If you read it out loud and it sounds monotonous, then you're probably saying the wrong thing. Have some personality, because otherwise it's just going to be scrolled through like everything else.
So, again, I'm not going to ask how old you are, but I feel like we're around the same age. And my favourite thing is there's a lot of brands who want to be appealing to Gen Z. And so they're writing in a tone of voice that I would never normally write in. I'm quite happy in the fact that I get quite a lot of work writing in a Gen Z tone of voice. But I'm wondering if, like, you ever find yourself having to humble yourself and be like, you mentioned it before with like the brain rot, which we will get to in a sec. I watched do you see the South Park episode of the 6-7 South Park episode? I watched it the other night. And I texted a friend of mine who's a bit younger, and I was like, can you still explain this to me? I've watched a whole episode on this, and it's the first one that I've laughed at and not understood why 6-7 is funny.
Simon, I still don't get 6-7. So
I don't get it. I don't get it. We're the same. Yeah.
But what reassures me is that everyone in my team does, and so that's fine. So the moment we need to answer that question, we have people in the team who can get it. No, I still don't get 6-7. The other day I walked past somebody and they were like, Dylan, what team are you in? I was like, 7? Don't know. So yeah, the good thing I would say is that, and sorry, I'm conscious I keep bringing things back to board, but actually we've got a really good thing called the Brain Rot Copy Bank. So this is a copy bank built by the people who are running community management day in, day out, with commonly used phrases, an explanation of what it means, examples of when you would use it. And not only does it help me, when I'm talking to clients about, the new frontiers of community management, it helps the team when it comes to, doing community management and finding that phraseology that they know is going to land with their audiences. It's a fantastic tool that I find myself using more often than I thought I would.
I remember when, this was 20 years ago, before I was even in social, I got my dad a little physical book called like the Little Book of Tech Speech. Do you remember you would put like 4 instead of 4 and all this sort of stuff. And it feels like a sort of modern version of that.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if, as you say, I think we're probably around the same age, but there used to be those articles in the Daily Mail where it's like, decipher your kids' text messages. Are they talking about drugs? And I don't think it'd be long until we have the equivalent for brain rot.
Yeah, completely. I'm 38. I'm not going to ask you how old you're.
I'm older. I'm 40. So
okay, fine.
Not far off.
I'm 39 in a month. So no, 6 weeks. Sorry. So if that helps in any way. This was actually at Splendid. So you might have done, because I was there before you. But I was working on Pot Noodle, and Alec, the CEO there, I remember he was away when I started. And I remember him coming over to me because he'd been away, but he'd been looking at the work that had been going out on Pot Noodle. And he said something really, it was a compliment, but it was so funny because he said, are you the guy we put on Pot Noodle? And I went, yeah. He said, I was expecting someone more laddie. And I was like, why? And he was like, because our tone of voice there is really laddie. And I don't know if I'm giving off lad, but I'm not a lad. And I was like, no, my job is to do the tone of voice.
Yeah, my job is to inhibit the tone of voice that is needed for the client. Yeah.
So I took it as a big compliment, but it was also really funny to be like, I get it, because you've not been here for like a week and a half, because you've been off doing stuff, and then you come back to this freelancer sort of in your office and be like, like, this is not who I was expecting to do it. And it's nice.
It goes to show that, appearances can be deceiving, right? I think we have
I'm
been
a lad.
Really surprised. You are a lad. Well, no, I mean more that, like, and I count myself in this, that I think it's very easy to judge somebody by appearance or how they look or how they speak. And more often than not, I think the people who are really excelling on various brands are people that you wouldn't necessarily think are the ones who would, right? So we've got people who are working on financial brands or car brands or food and drink brands, and you wouldn't necessarily think they have an affinity with those kind of things, but actually they are absolutely killing it. And often it's an affinity, but also, as you say, our job as marketers is to kind of inhabit that tone and that space that a brand is looking for. And I think that's the sign of a good marketer, somebody who can step outside of what their own personal vibe is and show up as a brand needs them to.
Are you involved in the interview process?
Yeah.
So are you asking people like, what are your interests, or is that something that would come in later on? Like, would it be a deal breaker if somebody was really interested in like a subject that you're about to win a client for, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think it depends. Sometimes we are hiring for a specific account. In those situations, I think it's good to understand whether they've got an interest in that sector. We do generally ask, talk to us about your interest. But interestingly for us, I think we ask that more from a cultural perspective, because I think for us, we're really keen to understand that people can be cultural adds to the agency. So, we have an interesting interview process where we will have a technical interview, and then we will have which goes through like a bit of a task, and then the final interview will be just about ensuring there's a cultural fit. So talk to us about your goals, what you're looking to do in 5 years, what makes you tick, how do you approach particular situations, and so that's where we'd ask. Talk to us about your interests. So for us, it's less of we need to know what your interests are to figure out whether you're going to have the skills for this job, and more just to know like, will you fit in? Will we be a match for you as much as you'll be a match for us?
Oh, sorry, I had to go on mute to stop my Google Hub from playing. I have this thing on my Google Hub where it plays Bad Habits at a random point in the morning because it reminds me to do my stretches, because my physio has told me I need to do them. So I play Bad Habits to remind me to do good habits. And the idea is,
Love that.
okay, Google, stop playing. And the idea is that like I have to do them by the end of the song. So like whatever's happened, so it's just gone off now. And I should have noticed it because it's 10:02. So like it was going to go off at some point by the end of this chat. But yeah. What were we saying? Yeah. So because what I find really fascinating about cultural fits, you're saying. So I'm going to try and like cut that out and avoid like it was in there. I have lots of friends, like I said, who are influencers, and the main person who comes to mind is my friend Jim. Do you know Jim Daly? He's quite a big football YouTuber. Whenever there is a brand that's like, we need someone who's interested in football, I just go, well, talk to Jim. You need to talk to Jim, because like he's built up this 150,000 following YouTube channel. He's done comedy shows about it. He's very good at what he does. He's got a podcast. He's like so I'm not selling him to you, but like the point is that like I imagine internally that it's useful to have like a mix of like interests that relate to the brands, but also just interesting things that you can go, oh, that's an extra life experience, or that's someone that like isn't represented here yet, or that is someone who
absolutely. And I mean, it's potentially become a bit of a buzzword within the industry, but I think it still rings true for me. Like, we don't look for culture fits, we look for culture adds. It's people who are going to stretch us, add more diversity, add more viewpoints, and that's the best way we can ensure that we are showing up in the best way for our clients, right? Like if you've got a homogenous group of people, turns out you're probably unlikely to be able to connect authentically with the audiences, and that can apply across a huge different number of demographics. But I think I'm glad to say that's something I think Vaughan does really well.
So hang on, let's just finish off with brain rot then. So
yes.
What I find interesting about the concept of that is I've seen you talk on LinkedIn about how language evolves really fast online, and I'm wondering if there's a methodology that you have to keep brands and clients happy with how like you're maybe changing their tone of voice halfway through a year, or like you're saying, okay, actually this isn't something that we included originally, but it's now in the zeitgeist, we need to be sort of on it.
It's a really good question, and I dare say a slightly boring answer, because you and I will know that social moves incredibly fast. It's arguably the medium that changes constantly, more so than print and PR and out of home and what have you. And so I think what we often tend to build into our relationship with clients is a degree of flex. It's very difficult to set a strategy and a tone of voice at the start of the year and stick to it for 12 months, because within 3, 6, 9 months things would have changed. And so we building that flex at the start, but I think the other part of it is also just ensuring that you're building up trust with your clients, that when you're going to them the recommendation to say, I think we need to shift this, I think this isn't quite right, I think we need to evolve this, they're like, yeah, we trust you. That's often a journey. It doesn't start from the first time you work with a client, and we've definitely got clients where we've been on a journey with them. And I think some of the best relationships we've got are the clients that we've worked with for a few years, where they've seen the value of what we do, they've seen what we can bring to the table, and we've like grown that trust between them, so that when we say this isn't going to work, we need to shift this, they totally get it. And so yeah, as I say, slightly boring answer, but I think the answer to that is having flex in what you're building right from the start, so that you've got the opportunity to move things as things evolve, but also establishing that trust with the client really early on, so that when you do go to them with something that's perhaps a bit left field, or you want to say, we said this 3 months ago, but actually now we're saying this, like, yep, cool, we believe you, let's do it.
It will obviously help that you're a social first agency, which means there's an element of trust there anyway, because the longer you've been I assume you find this as well, even though you've been in perm positions and I've only really been freelance, like the longer you've been in a thing, I think there's sort of it's called the Lindy effect, isn't it? It's like if a company's been around for 20 years, they're likely to be around for another 20 years. It's the same thing. If you've been doing social for, I don't even know how long Bond's been around, but it's been a long time, they're likely to be good at it, because why would they still be here otherwise? I suppose that helps with the trust.
100%, yeah. And Bourne's been around for a good 13, I want to say 14 years now. It's a specialist social agency, and I think that is something that works well in our favor compared to perhaps media agencies or creative agencies who are dabbling in social. Not to say they can't do great social, but I think one of the benefits of being in a social first agency means the hope is that clients trust us and feel like we've got a good sort of pedigree and know what we're doing and have kind of weathered enough storms to be able to say with confidence, this is what needs to happen and this is what we think is right. Yeah, but I think the important thing to say is that we don't ever rest on our laurels. I think
No.
It's very easy to get cocky, I guess, in this space as well. And God knows opinions, especially on social, are a dime a dozen. Given it changes and flexes and evolves so quickly, all you have to do is look at LinkedIn to find a million different opinions on the same topic. And I guess trying to figure out what the right one is or which one you kind of feel an affinity for is often the challenge there.
So yesterday I was doing a podcast with, do you know James Parker? He used to work at Cooler. He was one of their...
Yes, creative.
Yeah, and we were talking about the infamous Burger King tweet, the one that's the most liked brand account. And I said to him, you must bring this up all the time. And he was like, no, I because it's so long ago now that I don't want to use it as a reference point for kind of work now, and especially as culture's moved on and all that sort of stuff. And I'm like, I'd still bring it. It's like the most do you know what I mean? Like, you still would. But I suppose, and I'm literally updating my portfolio now in an attempt to make it ready for 2026, because otherwise I just won't. So I suppose, is there a limit to how long you use stuff that's done well with future clients, that you go, come on, this was 2 years ago, we've got to have a better example in the last 12 months, or how does that work for you guys?
I mean, I would say there's no hard and fast rule, and it probably depends on the particular example we're talking about. I think it's fair to say we've probably moved away from using examples from Twitter and X as showcases of great work. But I would say it probably depends on the individual piece of work. But also, I think as an agency, we're constantly challenging ourselves to be like, great, we had some success here. What's the next version of this? And I think if we don't have at least a good couple of hits every year, then we're probably not doing as great jobs as we could. So we've absolutely got campaigns that we reference regularly. But I think I dare say, in the next 12 months, we'll have another one that will supersede that and be the next one of those. And I think any agency worth their salt would be silly to rest on the laurels and not keep challenging themselves to find the next one. So for us, my hope is that we will, over the next 12 months, keep finding more of the ones that we're currently using and just evolve those examples. And hopefully, in 10 years' time, be able to look back and be like, God, look at this encyclopedia of fantastic work that we had.
We're recording this around the time where I've seen loads of nominations and awards that have been going out for different social media campaigns and stuff. And I wonder if you have an opinion on awards in general. I find it quite interesting, because you're putting against a brief against another brief, and ultimately you're then discussing it in ethereal terms of which ones you like the most. Whereas if you're pitching for a client, think of any brand, you're going to be tailoring the examples you give to that. And I feel like sometimes you can give better examples that maybe wouldn't win an award to a pitch than you would do to pitch for an award. But awards help with getting brands as well. So I wonder if there's a balancing act there.
No, it's a really good point. And I think the tension there, as you say, is often you might have an example that isn't award winning that would serve the client better. But we're all human, both us and the clients. And I guess ultimately you want to sort of show your credentials so that actually we're capable of doing this kind of work. So, if you've got a can-winning piece of work here, you're more likely to put that in front of the client, even if it's not quite as relevant, or do both, But I think awards absolutely serve a purpose. They're a great way of recognizing, I guess, success. I think the challenge is finding and entering awards that actually mean something. And it's a really difficult thing to say, I guess, because I don't for a moment want to suggest that there are awards that aren't worth it, but I guess there are different awards, right? There's awards that are voted for by your peers and by industry experts. There are other awards that are just a backslapping exercise within the industry. And I think the challenge for agencies is to ensure you find the awards that are credible and are going to give you the validation that you need as a business, but also hopefully reassure clients that actually, you guys know what you're doing.
Not all awards are created equal, and we don't have to name, what happens. I mean, I remember when I first got nominated for an award, they then said the final is basically whoever gets the most votes. And I was like, well, this is now a popularity contest. And then I got nominated for it again, which was really nice. And then the third time I think the only reason I won it was because I kept posting going, look, even if I get nominated again, I will never ask you to vote again. Just vote this one time.
Yeah.
And then I retrofitted it. I went, okay, I need something to go viral because
Yeah.
I need the most votes because I don't have a thing. So I green screened myself into an episode of Diary of the CEO. I found loads of questions, and I had him asking me questions as if I'd already won, and I was trying to be arrogant about how I was the best social media person. And I put it on LinkedIn. It went mental, and those are the only two things I can think of as to why I won. And I'm curious as to whether like Bourne has like a social media plan for themselves. Like, do you have a strategy for your own? I mean, I love following your LinkedIn updates. Maybe not your specifically, but Bourne specifically as well.
Yeah, basically, yeah, we've got a dedicated marketing team who are fantastic at what they do, and I guess
For Bourne.
the great for Bourne, yeah. So
Oh
we've got
wow,
marketing
okay.
at Bourne. We've got a head of marketing. We've got a marketing manager and content creator. We've also just got a marketing manager for New York. So we've got a slowly growing team, which is fantastic. And I guess the great thing about having a marketing team within a social agency is that they can be super social first. And so, but at the same time, they can give us that wider marketing context to ensure that we're doing the right things from a broader perspective, right? So I think Bourne could probably market ourselves on social media very well. Where we needed that help was, PR and awards and all the other bits and bobs that I think come with marketing. So we've got a fantastic head of marketing called Judy who leads that offering. And yeah, we've got a we almost treat Bourne's social feeds like our own client. So we've got a strategy, we've got a tone of voice, we've got a creative team who work on it. And then we've got a content creator who produces content and ensures that we're showing up as we would expect for any other brand.
I've worked. I don't even know how many agencies now, and there are so many that like see it as an afterthought. Like they see like their strategy as kind of, well, we're getting work in, so we're fine. And I always think because I freelance, I always go, well, no, like you always have to be like front of mind. You always have to like make sure people know you're doing good work. You have to put it out there. It's going to be in the episode, so I'm allowed. I'm not shading on anyone. Do you know Beth Thomas? She used to be at Deliveroo, then was at TikTok in house, and now works with Michael, who used to be the Ryanair guy at Slice.
Yeah.
Okay, so rough context.
But in the end,
But I asked her the same question. I said, like, you're trying to sell strategy into different places. What's your strategy? And she was like, we've got enough work. We haven't got a strategy at the moment. And I'm like, fair enough to, I totally get that. But she was like, no, we do need to work on that. And it's like it's a good point that we probably should, review more, because ultimately, like, it sounds really silly when you put it this way, but like as an agency, if you don't have good socials, how does that reflect on like with a brand that's maybe like going out to tender, maybe asking for a beauty parade of different agencies? Like they're looking for the agency that care about their brand as much as yours.
Absolutely. And I imagine for any brand looking for an agency, they will probably look at your social channels more so than they would for any other type of agency. One of the good things that we've got, and I imagine this isn't necessarily unique to Bourne, but what I love about Bourne is that we've also just got so many content creators who've got side hustles as content creators outside of work. And we actively encourage that. If you want to be a content creator outside of work, by all means, you're more than welcome to, as long as it's not sort of interfering with work. And so that means we've got people at work who just do it and live it and breathe it. And so when we're briefing stuff in for Bourne's own channels, we just know we're going to get shit hot work that is going to be like up there in terms of quality, because it's the kind of stuff that people do not only as their day job, but also do it outside of work. And we're very lucky in that respect.
I think what's made a huge difference to my personal social channels as well as my work in the last 18 months, 2 years, has been it being in WhatsApp groups with other creators, just sharing information about how the algorithm's working, how content's going, working with brands, like looking out for people, even down to like when, if I'm talking to someone and they're like, we're looking for a creator, do you know anyone? I can put it out to them and they'll go, yeah, actually I know this person, here's like 5 people. And the community around that, I think, is so undervalued. And I think to have people who have a foot in both sides of it, as I say, people want to be brands want to be people. So if you are a person who works in social and you're not also just at least trying to make content, even just like one a week just for fun to kind of see how it goes.
And it's good to keep your hand in it as well, right? That's the thing.
Yeah, so what channels are you on and where are you experimenting personally?
So I'm across Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn. I probably experiment the most on TikTok and LinkedIn. I think those are the ones that interest me the most. I appreciate LinkedIn might be a bit of a surprise for some people, but it's the one that I find most interesting, partly because I think the people who are cutting through on LinkedIn are the ones using it as if it isn't LinkedIn. People who treat LinkedIn like any other channel are the ones who are having the most success. So, the likes of brands like Monzo, but then you've also got I think he's the head of social media at Monzo, Richard. He's fantastic with his content. You've got a bunch of other people who are just showing up as human beings and taking all the sort of guff away from it and shredding all that sort of corporate bullshit, I think, are the ones that I really love. But then TikTok is the other place where I experiment. But I have to say, because my day job is in social media, I don't necessarily have a huge interest in being a content creator myself outside of work, but I always enjoy experimenting and trying out all the new formats. But yeah, I think TikTok and Instagram are probably where TikTok and LinkedIn are probably where I'm spending most of my time.
So do you know Surreal Cereal?
Yes.
Do you follow them? So I had John Thornton on, who's the head of that brand, and we were talking about LinkedIn, and I mean, I'll send you a link when the episode's out. It was fascinating just to hear, because they're a challenger brand, like they've got to kind of think outside the box. And we were talking about the similarities between what they've done with playing around with format and what Mr. Beast was doing, like in terms of coming on that platform, because he was very open about the fact he started Beast Bars because he couldn't find a brand that could afford a spot in his videos. So he was like, well, if I can't find a brand, I'll make a brand and then I have a spot. You know, I don't have to kind of farm it out to, I don't know, Cadbury's. I have my own chocolate bar brand sort of thing, which is a very clever way of doing it. But in order to get it into, you know, like Walmart, a place like that, he kind of had to join LinkedIn. And same with Surreal. They were saying that like one of the byproducts of being really big on LinkedIn is the buyers are there. And we very much got in on that train, which is not something that we intended on doing, but it's something that like, yeah, we'd love to be in a supermarket. Like, why would we not like to be in a supermarket? So, I agree with you. Where I think LinkedIn has been used too much as like this networking platform, and I think now it's almost. I don't want to say this because I haven't thought this all the way through, but it does feel almost like what Facebook was maybe like 12 years ago. You know,
and that comes with its positives and negatives, right? Like you've got your people who are posting absolute nonsense. And
Sorry.
Don't quote me on this because I'm sure I'm going to get the stat wrong, but I saw something about the fact that of all the people who have LinkedIn Premium, something like 67% post content that uses their AI generation feature. So
why?
This is it. So it just means all you're getting is a sea of sameness. And you can spot it a mile off, right? So I think that's also potentially why a lot of people are cutting through by just being human, just being themselves, because that's the stuff that's really going to connect with people emotionally.
I remember when they put that AI thing in there, and like, look, I'm sure I need to use it more. I don't really have an interest in AI, like in that way. I think it's kind of sucking out a lot of the creativity and the interesting things about social that I love. So I kind of hate it. But like in terms of like LinkedIn, I'm like, when that came in, I was like, who's using that? Like, this is a place where you're meant to be able to like write something and then like have it be seen by your peers and like kind of have a conversation. What are you using it for? Like, I can't think of a use case other than I need something to go out today.
Well, also what I would say is that LinkedIn has a very, like, if you think about the stereotypical tone of voice on LinkedIn, it is very much a fully formed version of what it is. And all you're doing by using its feature is making it even more LinkedIn, which just makes you, you know, I guess it just doesn't help you stand out. It just makes you like everyone else who's posting on LinkedIn, and it means your content gets buried, and it means you don't connect, and I just don't see the point of it.
No, completely. We've got the quick-fire questions to ask you, so we'll end on those. Quick for me, you take as long as you want to answer them. Okay, so who was the first person to believe in you?
Oh my goodness. First person to believe in me. My granddad, because I remember I was at university hating my degree, and I remember him saying, if you're not excited by it, if it doesn't make you feel something, then you shouldn't be doing it. Find something else. I was like, all right, thanks, granddad.
Nice. I don't ask everyone this one, but because you also read stuff, I'm going to ask, what is the best book on social media or community growth that you've ever read?
Ooh. So there's a book called The Long and Short of It by Les Binet and Peter Field, who are, I guess, the masters of marketing. And so not social specific, but they kind of wrote the rule book. And I would say that's probably had the biggest impact on my career, just because I think so much of what they laid out in that book still rings true years and years later. And actually, I think it's interesting that the advertising industry is constantly evolving, but the principles of marketing and advertising still remain the same. It's just how we deliver against them.
No, completely. Everything by Seth Godin is my favorite, and everything he talks about is the same thing, where it's like principles are just never changing. It's just the way that we, you know, I'm quite boring when it comes to books. I like to read old school marketing books, like from 1920s, 30s, because I like to work on things that are idea first and then platform second, because I always think if you know, when it was just a newspaper, you would have to have like the clear messaging there first and then go,
Yeah.
where is the audience for it? Whereas I sometimes think in social, we just go with, oh, we haven't posted in 3 days. We need something to go out on this. Otherwise the
Get
client's
something
going
out.
to, yeah. And it drives me mad because I
Yeah,
get it,
well,
but I also go,
yeah, and the last thing you want to be doing is just adding to the noise, right? You need to have a clear point of
yeah,
view and a clear reason to be there. So,
yeah, absolutely. Which brings me on neatly to, what is your unpopular opinion about social media?
oh goodness, unpopular opinion.
You're not going to get cancelled.
No, it's not. Certain aspects of social media are incredibly dangerous, and I don't just mean X. I think for me that goes without saying, but I think there are elements of what's happening on all channels that I think if we don't keep an eye on could have a pretty nasty impact on society in general. Yeah, which I imagine is probably not the most popular thing to be saying as a social media professional, but I think you can't work in this industry without recognizing the huge faults it has.
Is that like mental health stuff, or is that like surveillance, like selling the data surveillance capitalism side, or is that?
I think it's kind of all of it, right? It's the mental health stuff. It's the way, it's the dopamine, the fact that channels just rely on the dopamine hits that you get. It's the data collection. It is the the impact it can have on people's media literacy, and actually the lack of media literacy and social media literacy amongst a huge portion of our population is concerning, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Who is the most underrated person in social media?
Ooh. Who is the most underrated person in social media?
Ideally, not someone in Born. Can't be you.
There's a fantastic person. Do you know Joel Marlinason? He is a freelance strategist and a content creative, and the brain on that gentleman is fantastic. And he, I want to say, he's in his early 20s. He started off working on Chicken Shop Date as, I want to say, an intern, but he's forged his own career as a social strategist and creative. And I think he's going places because the way he reports on what brands are doing with the industry, but also just his views on how brands should show up and what they should be doing on social is fantastic. And he's currently a freelancer. I would love if we could hire him, but for the time being, we will just be content with collaborating with him, I think.
Amazing. Last two questions, I promise. If you had 1 extra hour in the day, how would you spend it?
Do you know what? I'd like to say it's something really lofty. It'd probably just be spent with more scrolling on TikTok.
Okay, last question. That's an honest answer because that's what I'd be doing as well.
Yeah.
If you could go back to your former self before your first job in social and give yourself one bit of advice, one bit of knowledge, one bit of something that might have helped you or hindered or changed anything, what would that thing be?
Trust your gut. I think I've found over the years, I've had an inkling or a sixth sense or just a sense that something was moving in a certain direction or I should have done something. And I've always doubted myself. And that's more, more about my own self-doubt, perhaps that I've had across the years and sort of imposter syndrome. But more often than not, my instincts have been correct. And there have been things that I wish I'd jumped on earlier that would have been a much better thing to have done. And so, yeah, I think trust your instincts and don't doubt yourself quite as much as you have, because often my instincts have been correct.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
That's all. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for watching. What an episode. I loved hearing his thoughts on storytelling in marketing, the role of data in deciding what content's going to get made next, and how they keep audiences coming back for more and more chunks of content from different types of brands. But what was your biggest takeaway? Comment it below. If you've enjoyed this, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up on YouTube or a 5-star review on iTunes or Spotify. And if you think you know a friend, a small business or a co-worker who would enjoy this episode, please pass the pod on to them. Just pass it on to one person. It helps more than you'll ever know. The next episode is with the legendary Beth Thomas, who started out working at Deliveroo before going in-house at TikTok, and now she's co-founded her own agency. So subscribe for that one. Godspeed and keep creating.